everyone, it's me, the Booknester, Rebecca. And I'm back because I have completed the Midnight Assassin. You may have remembered this book by Skip Hollingsworth whenever I mentioned it in a previous little minuscule haul that I had. And I was going to do this one in the same vein as one of my previous review videos. I was going to use stick figures to kind of tell the story. And as I was planning it out and drawing it and some of the things that I was Googling, I just suddenly realized it was so disrespectful if I did that. This is a non-fiction book. These are real people. They really lived. I mean, this guy doesn't rival Jack the Ripper. To me, he surpassed him, and he was prior to Jack the Ripper. But I also want to share and acknowledge those women that lost their lives. So with that in mind, I'm going to put a small little montage together between the names of the individuals, when they died, and also some of the headlines that surrounded these horrendous murders. And when you come back, I'll tell you some of the things that I liked about the book, things I learned about the book. It was a fantastic read, and I learned so much. See you in a moment. So as I mentioned before, there's some things that I learned from this book. And that's one thing that's fantastic about nonfiction or even historical fiction and why I read it. It's easier for me to learn in context and with a story around it than just learning straight facts. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the word lunatic. And I'm sure some of you already know this, but I didn't. So the word lunatic, if you take it apart, Luna and tick. Luna is moon, of course we know that, and tick is to be struck. So the word lunatic actually means moonstruck. And at this time, people believed that the moon and too much exposure to it could really change your behavior. And so one of the things that is brought up is that people noticed that the murders occurred either immediately before or after and during full moons. So it was interesting because I didn't know that that's where lunatic came from. And it really does play a part in this book. The other thing that also plays in it is knowing what books were being published and who was writing books. You know, they were devouring Poe at this time. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. At one point, one of the theories that somebody brings up is that perhaps it's a doctor who turns into this, basically based right on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because when they read it, they believed this really had happened to some degree. So you have a lot of those different stories going on, really feeding into this. So that was one thing I learned. The second thing that I learned was a little bit more of Texas history, so hopefully you'll be interested, but I found it fascinating. So the state capitol was being built, and one of the things that Texans have a tendency to talk about is that the state capitol in Texas is actually slightly taller than the capitol in Washington, D.C. The other thing, come to find out, didn't know this, it's actually bigger than all the Parliament buildings over in England. There was a group of 10 and that were like contractors on the state capitol, and they were from Illinois, they were from Chicago. And their payment actually was over 3 million acres up in the panhandle of Texas. Now, they said the size of this amount of acreage is about the size of Connecticut. All they wanted was that land. And that land became one of the largest, if not the largest, ranch here in Texas. Now, I had heard of this ranch, and I went to school for a short time up near there, so I knew all about it, I thought. But the largest ranch in Texas, called the XIT, is actually, or was actually, owned by a bunch of men from Chicago. So I thought that was interesting as well. A third something that I learned, I'm not a huge sports fan. I love rugby and I like to watch soccer. But beyond that, I'm not really into it. So I definitely don't have sports history. But I did not know that they had semi-professional baseball teams as far back as in the 1885 era, and that they were playing it in Austin. And so that was somewhat of a shock for me. But I want to read a quote because I thought it was hilarious, because they were talking about people were watching this game, and it says, with as many as 50 runs being scored each game due to a lively ball, extraordinarily small gloves, and absolutely horrendous pitching. 50 runs a game. That might make it more interesting. I say bring on smaller mitts. Pitching, no, we don't have to do horrendous pitching anymore because I like a good pitcher. So the fourth thing, I don't know about other states, but when I was younger growing up, and I am older than the average booktuber is, there really wasn't anything you could go do on a Sunday. But I didn't realize, and I had heard the term Sunday laws as well. Made sense because it's all about a Sunday. But during all this mayhem that's going on, and the fact that Austin is trying to get people to not think that it's the murder capital of the world, basically. And so they decide that they are going to establish Sunday laws. And I want to read this as to the reasoning. So it's Sunday laws, and it says, in which all businesses would have to be closed from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and saloons closed for the entire day, so that the residents would have more time to read the Bible and improve their Christian attitudes. Whoa. So knowing that history was a little surprising. And that it would be used for those purposes, and also used as a publicity stunt in some way, because that would have been reported in all those wonderful newspapers that have been reporting all the other things of how Austin is turning into this more morally appropriate and superior place, therefore safe, and you can move there and come here and bring your businesses here. Exactly what we see today. And that's my fifth and final thing. There's tons of other things in here that are really fascinating, but I could not believe reading this how much of it is still just the same today. It just was the politics that you see in here. I mean, it's a juicy read. There's politics, there's infidelity, there's pointing fingers everywhere. Of course, there's the murders, which are just atrocious. And I want to say that when the author writes about the murders, he does tell you what happened. But he got those from newspaper articles that everybody was reading. He didn't get it necessarily from a coroner's report or any of that. He didn't jazz it up. This is what other people were reading at the time. And I think he did a fantastic job of balancing that as far as not having it just about the gruesomeness. We see the fledgling police departments and stuff, and detectives, they looked at these each individually instead of looking at overall what was happening. I mean, this was the same MO constantly, and they still went after who wanted to kill that one woman and the motive for that one woman. And we even have an incredible trial, we have a retrial, we have a fantastic scene where a lawyer does a total Perry Mason, which was just fantastic, trying to prove that his client's foot didn't match the footprint that they have from the scene. And it's great. It really is. I was like, oh, you go, Perry. Again, sounds like an exciting novel, doesn't it? It's nonfiction. This really happened. And other things keep going. And then you get to go even over to London and kind of find out what's going on with Jack the Ripper. So I learned some stuff there too. So this is why I read this stuff. And I hope other people do. You learn so much in a great way. But I still have to say, these were real people. And if this happened today, we would all be terrified, even today in 2016. So I hope you get a chance to pick it up. I think it's a great read. He did a really good job, I thought. It's just learning about human nature and the fact that sometimes we are doomed to repeat the same thing. Oh, so I hope you enjoyed this. I look forward to talking to you soon.